Now, today we're going to see a few tools Blender has which are useful when we are animating. I personally not use them so much or at all, but it's just good to know and how you can also enable them. Now, the first thing we're going to see is actually ghosting. If you don't know ghosting, or sometimes referred as onion skinning, well, almost always referred as onion skinning, it's just that Blender likes to call it ghosting. Now, I'm going to get rid of the other guy and I'm going to go into I'm on pose mode and I'm going to go into my rig. On my properties tab, on my armature over here, okay, I'll just change it to another shape just so that you can actually see it, and we can go right down to the tab that says Ghost. Now, what Ghost is basically you set up a range, and as you can see when I raise it, even though it's just a little bit gray, well, I think you'll probably be able to see. Okay, it just makes a ghost of other keyframes or the positions our bones are going to have based on the parameters we have over here. If I click select it only, it will only select it, it will only ghost only the selected bone basically. Okay, if I uncheck the selected only, then it's going to ghost all the bones. Now, of course, this isn't always useful. As you can see, in most cases you cannot really tell. Okay, you cannot really just tell what's going on, and you can see that there is a lot of, it just looks like noise in this case. And of course, if I change the range, it will make higher and basically grab more frames that you can actually ghost. If I change the step, it will skip steps based on, it will skip frames based on the steps I have over here. Now, if I set this to 5 and let's change the range to 5, when I click play, you will see that they automatically update too. Okay, it's fun to watch, but it's not always that useful, or at least I found that it's not always that useful. Okay, since there's a lot of noise, but sometimes they might help if you do not want to move back and forth with your frames. The other things, the other case you can use the ghosting is if you use the in range, you can set up a starting frame and an ending frame. Well, let's make this to 100, and then instead of updating based on the current keyframe your pose actually is, okay, then you can have all your keyframes at once, and you can set the steps similarly to the around frame. Okay, and selected only, of course, goes for only selected. Now, on keyframes, we'll only make a ghost on keyframes you actually have placed. Now, the trick thing is, if you have in range at 0 or at 1, on keyframes, if you click on it, then it's not going to show. Okay, so keep that in mind. Why these aren't, since this one is related to properties in this one, why they aren't active when the on keyframes is selected is as good as guess as anyone else. Okay, so this is ghosting. The other thing we can see is motion paths. Let's remove the ghosting, since it's not really since we covered that. Okay, now motion paths is exactly what it calls, what it sounds. You can actually make a motion path, so you can visualize the path that's going to take for each bomb. Now, for character animation, it might not always be that useful, but if you have other things like ball or cubes or all that, since they do not have all that much of bones, okay, it probably will be a bit more useful. So the only problem with motion path is that you can still have around frame or in range. Let's see the around frame. You actually have to calculate it and calculate it again every time you make a change. You have to bake the motion path. You can select to bake either on the tails or on the heads of the bones. Let's keep it at tails. Okay, and you need to set a start and end. And if you click OK, it will start. It will make a path, as you can see over here. This line indicates the path it's going to move. Your bone is going to move. And you can see that in range, I can actually see, and based on the display range I have over here, okay, you can set how many frames you want to see before and how many frames you want to see after, and of course the steps. You can also click to show the frame numbers, so it tells you that at frame 11 is going to be over here and frame 12 is going to be over here or on the other. If I click in range, then you have all of this. You see the whole path. Now, the problem is that if I change this, well, this would have been a bit more useful if I could do changes directly on the curve, on the path that it created, but you cannot change. And if I do this thing, if I change this, okay, I've added a new keyframe, then but the path still remains the one we had previously. So I need to update the path. So every time I do a change, I actually have to go in here and click update path. You can see that we have a few more options. So you can check to emphasize where you actually have placed a keyframe, and you can also visualize the keyframe numbers and all that. So if I want to add another bone, or basically let's do it for the hips, since this one is more important than the head. Okay, if you calculate again, well, I actually have to calculate, and I will select my head, and I'm actually going to delete the path for the head, and I'm only going to keep the one for the hips. Okay, and you see the whole range. The bone is going to go. Frame numbers, we don't need them, and we can now see the blue. The blue numbers are where you actually have, I have set up a keyframe. So just like that, I can see that from one line to the other, okay, going into a straight line when falling down, it shouldn't be that natural, in my opinion. So this should probably need a little bit of work. Okay, and they're kind of fun to watch. Now, this is as far as motion paths are concerned, this is how they work. Okay, Now if you're going to use them or not, it still depends a lot on you. Now on the previous video, on the IK rigging video, or how we can make an IK rig like the one we have over here, we saw how to set up the IK. Now there is another way, but it's not that useful. If you hit T and you bring this tab over here and you go into the options, you can set up the auto IK. And now if I move it like this, if I move a bone, it will make it so that it's kind of makes an automatic IK solution. Okay, for a spine and stuff like that might seem a bit useful, but it's not always that useful. And of course the bones need to be connected, and not even connected with offset, to be able to use the IK. And when I move this, you can see the little bit of a dotted line between the bones and the end of the start of the chain, and the end of the chain should be the one you're moving. Okay. Now of course this has its uses and its faults, but it's better than for a few cases that you do not need a whole IK chain to make it. Okay, then you can use this, just a quick and dirty way to have a little bit of IK. Okay, so if you want to make your character look down like this, okay, you do not have to make a whole new IK chain and IK handle like this. You can just enable auto IK, close it then, and add your keyframes into your whole animation. Let's clear it. I don't want to clear the transform. I want to do this. Now there's also the pose library. So if you want to save an actual pose, if you want to make one pose, you can click new, and you actually have to add your current pose to your library. Okay, and if you click add new, you can have this pose. You can save another pose, add new, or add new from the current frame, and you can actually move this. Okay, you can click the apply specified pose library pose rig. So if I want to move, if I have a few cases or a few poses, like this is useful basically for the hands. You can have a pose library for the hands, for if they are open or closed. Okay, since there's no need to opening them and closing them all the time. If you spend a little bit of time to make a pose library for the hands basically, okay, and add them over here, you can set them up into when you want to have the hands opened or closed, you can simply do it by using this. Okay, you can select your pose, you can change the names and change it by clicking this thing. Now the only thing that you have to keep in mind with this is, if you have poses in your pose library, then in Unity they are going to be used and they are going to be seen as single frame animations. So if you are going to use animations, or if you are going to use it, the pose library for animations that are for Unity, then you better be just delete them and delete everything. Okay, and I think you should also, you can see that there's the pose library over here. You should save and save it like that. Now Now, one last thing we're going to see. It doesn't actually have to do with animation, but it has to do with weight painting. So, whenever I apply an armature on my mesh, I can actually go into my modifiers list, and there's the two keys you see in most of all modifiers, and if I click this, it's going to display the armature, or in edit mode it's going to display the modifier. So if I also click the next one, it will adjust the edit gauge to the modifier results. So I move this character like this, or whatever position I want to have it, and when I hit edit, I can actually come over here and edit this thing, and edit like that. Okay, now the trick thing with this is to actually make sure when you actually want to do a change to the mesh, you do not have this enabled. Otherwise, you're not going to see the rest position. You're going to see the position that the vertices have when they are placed like that. Okay, so yeah, that could be a trouble in some cases. Now, the actual thing we are going to see on weight painting is, I will have to go, of course, into the weight paint. I'll hit Z to see the actual, the wireframe. And on tools, if I go into, I do not need the brush right here. The only thing I want is the weight tools. If you do not have this enabled, then you need to enable it from the user preferences and the add-ons. Now, if I select a bone, but the trick thing to select the bone is select it in pose mode, and then select your mesh, and then go into weight paint, and that is a problem that Blender has. So anyway, now with weight tools, I can actually hit to normalize all weights of all vertex groups. So it will take all my bones and normalize them. Okay, it will make sure that everything is on one. I can mirror, but to mirror my weights, I need to have identical names on our bones, and I do not right now, so I'm not going to hit it. I can also clean, and one thing that is more useful is the actual level. So if I click levels, you will see that all the buttons over here will have a vertex, will have a few properties that we can change over here. So if I click levels, I can actually adjust my levels. So I can offset it. Okay, and you can see I can offset the weight, and you can see how much it changes the influences. I can also add it, and this will actually change for only the current active group, or I can subset the all groups. Of course, this can be kinda have a few problems, as you can see, or the selected pose bones, and so on. Now, I do not always use this stuff, but it could be useful if you have a lot of problems and you can't get the weights right. This could be a bit more useful. And of course, you have a few more other cases. You can also do a weight gradient. So you have a gradation or gradient to set up the weight when you're setting the weights. Okay, it's a little bit more useful, or yeah, you can guess where you can find a use case for this. So I think I've covered everything I wanted to cover. Now, of course, there's a few more stuff, like we have our dope sheet over here. I can actually change this to the curve editor or the graph editor, yeah. And when I select a bone, or let's select this one since it has more keyframes. Okay, this has the actual path. You can see color coded based on the properties we are affecting, like the X, Y, and Z, and the properties for your quaternion, okay, your vector force generally. And I can actually take and adjust this like they are Bezier curves. Okay, and you can set this up, and you can change the way it's going to move based on, and let's select the opposite and hide everything else, and I'm only going to keep my okay. You can see that it will change its movement based on the curves. And if you hit T, you can see you can change the interpolation between a keyframe. You can make it constant, you can make it linear or Bezier. If you make it constant, then it's going to jump onto the next position, as you can see over here. If you make it linear, it's going to go linearly. Okay, it has a few steps, or one step. Oh, let's bring this back. Okay, it has a few steps before reaching its target. And if you make it Bezier, then you can actually adjust the way it's going to go. You can see that each of these changes dramatically the path it's going to move. And of course there's other stuff like the easing. Okay, some prefabs you want to have. This is more useful, of course, when you're animating objects and not exactly characters, but of course you can also use this. Like you can see that you have a bounce dynamic effect, so not only it reaches its target, it's going to do a bit of bounce. So I've covered everything I had to cover, all I wanted to cover. There is a few other stuff which we're going to see probably in another video. Okay, so I'll end the video here. You know what to do: subscribe, like, and support. You can support me on Patreon or by grabbing a project or two from Gumroad, and so that of course we can continue keep making videos both for Blender and Unity and other stuff in the future. So I'll see you next time.